Hello, folks. Please forgive the lighting. They've got a problem with the lighting desk. They're rebooting it at the moment. It will become very slick and very theatrical shortly, but just not now. We've got the overhead lights on, and that's just the way it's going to be. Our final solo speaker this afternoon, there is a panel session coming up after this, but our final solo speaker this afternoon is Andrew Phillips, CTO for Skyscanner, and paraphrasing what he told me, he's going to be talking about innovation, the agony, and the ecstasy, occasional. And there's more agony than ecstasy, I think, a lot of the time. So, Andrew, over to you.
Thanks. As I was listening to some of the presentations earlier on, I realized that as being one of the engineers here, that mine was not going to be as slick or as shiny as some of them, but hopefully I will keep you all entertained for half an hour. I'm going to talk a little bit about me, my journey at Skyscanner, but really with that, a bit about what Skyscanner is, what I consider the innovations we've done. Obviously, there will be lots of things I won't get to talk about in half an hour, but really to give a bit of a flavor of what's worked well for us, and also what's probably more critically, or hopefully more interestingly, what's not worked so well for us. There's plenty of them. There's a long list of them. I'm going to pick out a couple of them as I go through and just try and highlight some of the challenges that we've seen over the years. So a bit about me. Despite the accent, I was born in Aberdeen, as I realize quite a few people who I've been speaking to today are. I started working in oil and gas originally as a kind of data visualization engineer, and that was one of the kind of things that got me into tech. Went to St Andrews afterwards, studied with some people who are here, who've come to heckle me apparently, and then moved to Edinburgh. And why I say that, moved to Edinburgh for Skyscanner. I started as a grad, and why I say that was I had a different job offer at the time with GCHQ. I was going to be a spook, and I thought that sounds really exciting, really interesting. But the appeal of being a relatively small cog in a very big machine versus Skyscanner, which at the time was only 30-odd people, I personally felt that was the thing for me, and it's that interest in learning. Interesting in trying to have a bigger impact that I think has kind of formed some of my opinions, some of my influence, some of my thoughts on innovation, and particularly the highs and lows. This is me 2 years after I joined. As you can see, I've not aged one bit. That might be 2 kids, and I've been looking after a dog this week as well. But as I said, why I've joined Skyscanner, why I like talking about these kind of things, is that I've always said if I was to stop learning that I would leave, and I'm still there 14 years later. I hope I will still be here in a few years' time, unless I do anything stupid. Maybe, hopefully not today. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. Skyscanner, for those of you who don't know, we're a travel search app, site, etc. About 114 million monthly users, so we're quite big scale now. But we weren't always that way, and this is what we used to look like just before I joined. Sorry. Now, I'm not going to go through every incarnation we've ever had, but I wanted to kind of start with this one because it's quite interesting. I mean, obviously, this is not a UX or UI that we have anymore, thankfully. But we were quite innovative even back then. We had a map functionality on the right-hand side. You could look at the globe, you could see where to go. That was quite innovative at the time. We were one of the first travel metas, and then we were one of the first to do lots of different innovations within the product. Fast forward a couple of years, and obviously visuals are slightly better, but we'd also started innovating with things like price alerts. We were one of the first companies to introduce a price alert functionality where you see the price going up, you see the price dropping, and from a traveler point of view, hugely valuable, quite innovative at the time. Now that's a table stakes. You have to have it as part of the product. But we've done these little bits of innovation across the product. This was our first mobile app, which I'm assuming no one thinks a mobile app is innovative anymore. But one of the first bits of functionality we had in it was a globe, and you could take your phone, you could move your phone around, and depending where you were pointing, it would suggest to you the destinations in that general direction. I mean, it didn't last very long. It was not it was innovative, but it was a total gimmick. I have myself to thank for that idea, and thankfully it got deleted quite quickly. But it was interesting. We were doing lots of different things to innovate. Fast forward to 2018, we started to use machine learning models to recommend places for you. So flying from Aberdeen, lots of different destinations you can go to. UX has gone through another redesign. And then come on more recently to the kind of, sorry, I've skipped that slide slightly ahead of it. We've then redone our app. The app is a lot cleaner, but we've started to add innovative and interesting things into it. We've got, in this case here, trip planning, and then much more recently, as in I think last week, we launched some kind of AI related. So there's let AI inspire you on the side there, and again, continuing to innovate. Now we also innovate in lots of different ways. A lot of you probably haven't seen our Become a Travel Magician advert, but compared to some of our competitors who have hundreds of £1 million of marketing budget, we don't. We've got tens. And so we've done a lot to kind of do fun, much more kind of startup vibe of things. I was showing my wife the Travel Magician advert last night. She's like, that's so silly, but it worked. We've done TV ads in the past. We've poured millions of pounds into them and they've not had a return. So saying that just as like a bit of a peppering of things we've done that are innovative, things we continue to do, but it's not all been plain sailing. And I think one of the things that I've learned certainly over the years is that a lot of people say to me, like me at Skyscanner say to me, we're not innovative anymore. We're not doing new, innovative, cool things. And I think a lot of people think innovation has to be the big ticket items, the things that are very easy to see. But actually teams are doing innovation all the time. So what are some of those examples? I'm not going to go through all of them, but to give a bit of a flavor of this. When it comes to technology, particularly around our hosting. So we moved from a data center world to AWS quite a few years ago now, and then we had lots of problems. So we said, okay, right, we need to containerize. You know, the common story that a lot of people have gone through in that journey. But we were being innovative. We were using spot instances, which are basically the unused, the cheapest, 70% discount on Amazon. Great, but they can be removed at any point in time. They could just be killed. They can kill whole pools of compute resource. So we built a Kubernetes cluster on top of it, but we built that because Amazon didn't have anything that was providing that for us at the time. We spent several years building out what was very innovative. There's loads of blogs that we've done with Amazon about our usage there. And then they were like, well, why are you not using our systems? Well, here's a long list of all the problems. And then fast forward another year, well, EKS, their own Kubernetes, had caught up. They'd taken our insights and gone, okay, right, this is what we do. So we then migrated fully to EKS. And I say that as a bit of a pendulum swing. I quite often use the term when it comes to some of the things we've innovated on, that we innovated, we created a whole platform, lots of tooling, systems, etc., to get us to the point where we could actually use spot instances at scale. We're the largest company, I think globally actually, using spot instances in the way we do. So it was really innovative. It saved us millions of pounds. Our hosting costs were dramatically lower than they would have been using even reserved instances. But then Amazon caught up. And I feel positive and proud that we'd done the innovation. We had to scale, but equally, we had to then stop doing that and not spend lots of time continuing to run at something that Amazon had effectively caught up on us for. The other one, which always causes a lot of frustration and I suppose and debate, is around languages. So when I first started, we were a .NET, VB6, Microsoft SQL house, and that was basically it. Over the course of 6-7 years, we'd acquired companies. We then had, as our previous CTO said, all of the technology. Like this picture here is obviously a small subset of languages, but we had everything. And that meant that people couldn't move teams. They couldn't move teams very easily, for one. It was really hard to build infrastructure tooling, et cetera, around it. And so that doesn't sound necessarily innovative in any way, but we were using the different languages that were innovative. They were the new thing. They were the new way of doing something. We jumped on them, so we had another one, and another one, and another one. And the lesson we've learned from that is actually to go back to saying, well, no, we want one tool for one job. So we still got a few languages, but to not necessarily jump on the next bit of technology, the next thing that's come up. There may be value, there may be benefits to it. We need to evaluate that, but we went from one to hundreds, and we've been pulling back and trying to scale back, and that's frustrating. A lot of developers say, well, I want to go and use Rust rather than something else. But we're like, well, yeah, but actually, if you want to use it, and then someone else wants to use Scala, and someone else wants to use Go and everything else, we don't have that community, the ecosystem that we're looking for, and ultimately the scalability. The next piece of innovation, I kind of touched that we've made innovations along the way in the product, but one of the things that I want to call is what we call direct booking, and 2016, I think it was, we launched what we called facilitated booking. So Skyscanner's normal model, you go through, you do your search, you click, and you get redirected to BA, to Ryanair, to whoever. And we said, the mobile booking experience is shocking. Like most people at the time were not booking on mobile. So it doesn't sound hugely innovative, but at the time nobody else was doing it. And we said, right, we're gonna actually facilitate the booking on our side. So we're not taking your payment details, but we are facilitating it for you. We make it a nicer look and feel. The UI is cleaner. And we had like a 50% increase in conversion on mobile on our first release. Like amazing, hugely valuable product. Hugely innovative at the time, especially if you understand the context of the airline industry, which is stuck in the 60s or something on most of their technology solutions. This was innovative for us. And then we started adding more to it. So we started taking some of the payments ourselves. We started having a contact center, which actually was down the road from here, to handle inbound calls. And actually it grew and grew and grew. And then we started looking at it more holistically and going, well, this is a bit of the pendulum swing where we said, oh, well, we've done this. This is amazing. But then we went back and looked at it. And the one I always quote, which is probably slightly unfair, is that British Airways, who was one of our launch partners, they basically copied our look and feel. Like the product looked really similar, and their conversion rate had come up, actually basically to on par with ours. So we were running all of this infrastructure, handling all of this information. Something that had been innovative had then become a huge cost center for us without the actual impact that it originally had. So pendulum swings back again, and we go and stop doing that. And we felt really proud that we'd had the kind of the guts to say, actually, this is not the right thing for us anymore. We're going to stop doing this, shut down the product. But that is a bit of that pendulum swing, as I keep saying. The last bit, and I probably won't, just from a time point of view, probably won't go into too much detail from various aspects of this, but when it comes to innovation and other things, I guess, that we've maybe got some bits right and some bits wrong. For anyone familiar, the picture on the bottom right here is from Spotify's kind of tribes and squads model. They're what they said they were doing at the time, although they weren't actually doing it, in terms of how they organized their teams. And it was a fascinating thing. We learned they were innovating. Like they were innovating about organizational design and influence. And so we said, okay, right, well, we'll have some of that. But we didn't take all of it. And I'm actually quite glad we didn't, because it turned out later that whilst the blog that had been written said all these things, they actually didn't implement it exactly how they said. It was a bit of a polished thing from a press release point of view. But we took the bits that we thought were useful, and we then adapted and iterated. And I say that because sometimes looking at innovation elsewhere, you might go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. We should just do a carbon copy of it. But I'm quite pleased that we didn't just do a carbon copy of it. You've got to adapt to your own environment, your own cultures and everything that go with it. Ironically now, or at least in the last couple of months, we've been having done a lot of kind of research. There's a really interesting book called Team Topologies, and that's much more like we actually ended up with. We didn't know about it at the time, but it was much more what we did. And that's where you've got enablement teams, platform teams, value and stream-aligned teams. And that's much more the model we have, but we call them tribes and squads. And I say that because we've changed a bit. We've followed other companies. We've also not followed them. And I say that as a bit of a word of warning that just doing things that look innovative and new, even though they obviously solve problems for us, aren't always the most valuable things to have done. No slight, obviously, on Spotify, which I admire quite a lot, in how they actually do organise themselves behind the scenes. So as I said, I've hopefully highlighted that there are a few downsides to innovation. There are plenty of upsides, obviously, as well. But this pendulum swing piece, I think, plays into one of my favorite XKCD articles, which is around how standards proliferate. When you think about my example of the languages we had, what was happening was every time someone said, I need to solve this problem, they went and found a new tool, found a new language, and then we added it. And so we had a new one. Now, I didn't talk on data or on our API standards, but data, again, very, very similar. Oh, well, we can't get the data for this system in this way. Okay, I'm going to go and build a new one. And they say, oh, I'm going to migrate everyone over. And that's the massive alarm bell that rings in my head when we say we're going to go and migrate the entire company to this new platform which does everything. It's all singing, it's all dancing. And the reality is that is hugely expensive, and actually ends up in this situation. You end up with another one. We have had one project at least in data that has been successful. We migrated all of our logging, infrastructure logging, alerting to New Relic. And that's not a sales pitch for New Relic before anyone jumps in, but we migrated everything over, and we actually migrated everything. We spent the time and effort and invested in shutting down the old platforms, because the fear was, well, we had New Relic in, but we've still got these 12 other platforms that do little bits of it. And then we said, right, we will do this, but we will do this on the caveat, it is n-1. We have to reduce over time. And that's why I say that this is a bit of I sometimes joke with the team, of a bit of a proxy of how Skyscanner has thought over the years. We go, oh yeah, we'll solve this, and we'll add something, and then we add something, and then we add something. And I think especially in the kind of, the landscape we're in now, where there's a lot less hiring going on in the industry, there's a lot more challenges in that. This that worked for us for quite a long time, where we were innovating, doesn't work for us anymore, and we need to make sure we're controlling it. The other piece, and this goes back to the innovation has to be big, has to be a new product, a new way of doing something. And the team that ran our direct booking system, there was 50, 60 people spread across a few different offices, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of infrastructure and everything running it. Now, when that team stopped doing that work, when they stopped running that system for us, they pivoted and they started making small incremental improvements to our product. And they made lots of proof of concept, lots of experiments, lots of them that didn't work. But some of them that added 1%, 2% to our business, that's multiple millions of pounds a year of extra revenue. And so they are not the big, amazing, innovative projects that I think often people kind of hang on to, but they're the things that give you the small gains that all add up. We all understand, hopefully people understand compound interest and all those things. It's that the team are getting now really excited about it. And whenever someone says to me now, oh, are you innovating? Are we doing? I'm like, you go and speak to anyone in various different teams, and they'll be innovating in their area, innovating in their space. And I think for me, that's something, a bit of a kind of culture shift for us, where we've got to think a bit more in that way, looking at the little bits that we can do. That said, and no presentation would be complete without some AI, because obviously we want to innovate in AI as well. I know there have been various presentations on this today, and I won't hopefully won't bore people too much, but we've slightly balancing ourselves on that pendulum swing. We didn't want to go all in and deploy 10 teams to go and do everything in AI and become become a travel magician or something like that. We said we're going to be a bit more measured. We're going to fast follow. So we're going to keep an eye on what's going on in the industry. We're going to do some experimentation. We're going to release a product that you can start to try out. And what it started to look like in, sorry, let's get back. What it started to look like in our product are better, more tailored recommendations when it comes to things like SEO. So it's a really tangible use of AI, where previously we had copywriters going and writing articles for different markets, in different languages, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can go and ask AI to do that for us. Great. So we've got a practical use of it that significantly adds value to us and allows us to scale out. But we've also had, from a customer, traveler point of view, we've started to do what I would call, compared to a lot of companies, a fairly basic search thing, where you say, well, where do you want to go? You want a beach holiday that's suitable with a family with kids and a dog, et cetera, and we'll try and answer that for you. But we want to answer it in a way that's quite inspirational. So we'll have, as per the previous one, we'll have the pictures, we'll have the more inspiring, tailored content. But that's a very kind of small, like dipping our toe in the water, as it were. We've not swung to like, let's do everything. We're just trying to get ourselves a bit more in the middle of that balancing act. Still being a little bit innovative, but really listening and hearing what else is going on. And why am I saying that? Well, in the rest of, sorry, slightly skipping ahead actually. The other bit that we're doing, and there's a lot of this, is that we're trying to use a lot of the internal tools that we have and adding AI. So, you know, sort of GitHub Copilot we're using, obviously Alexia was talking about the Microsoft Copilot earlier on. Atlassian we use quite a lot. They've got a huge amount of kind of AI inspiration, AI intelligence being added in. Something which I thought was quite interesting actually, the team came to me a few weeks ago and were like, all of the things we do from a kind of what we call tech bar, they kind of walk up and answer your questions. Like, what if we had a ChatGPT style bot that was doing a lot of that for us? Like, what would that save? What would that free people up to do? So there's lots of little things that we're doing. We use Zoom a lot. So what are we, you know, again, Alexia talked a bit about the kind of the narration. If you know, now we're at a point where you can have the call, it will transcribe it for it will give you your actions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot we're doing there, and it's definitely interesting. But what I should have skipped ahead to was that there are lots of companies, and this is one example, but there are hundreds of travel startups in AI at the moment. They are everywhere, and they're all trying to do a very similar thing. There's one that you can have as a WhatsApp chatbot type thing and say like, book me a trip here. There's this one, Travel Magician, which is not at all related to us, our advertising campaign. But there's lots of companies doing the more complete package. But the balancing act that we are trying to strike there is that do people really want that right now? Like, I think probably us as a more technically advanced audience would be more comfortable doing a bit of this, let's have a chat, let's do this. But, you know, speaking to lots of people and, you know, doing a lot of market research, like lots of people don't want a text-based prompt, a text-based way of doing things. They want the inspiration. They want to see visually what they're doing. Now, obviously things are advancing quite quickly, so we may live to regret some of those statements, but that's what is happening a lot in the industry, and so we're keeping an eye on it in that way. But where else can AI apply, again, from that innovation side of things? Well, particularly around sustainability. And you know, there are various things that, you know, I've become a bit of an aviation geek over the years of being at Skyscanner, and you know, we're not a particularly eco-friendly industry, as it were. You know, planes pollute a lot. People in general are being much more conscious about that. Now, there's the basics of, you know, you can say, we do say like how much carbon's being produced in a flight, et cetera, to give people a more informed way of traveling. But where I think the real interest is in AI is in the travel industry is, well, what if you can start to do predictive maintenance on aircraft? What if you can start to say, well, these parts are going to fail, this engine's more efficient in this conditions, et cetera, et cetera. You can do a lot of quite innovative things there, which you just couldn't do several years ago. And so I say that as a kind of very divergent from what Skyscanner does, but for me, there's a lot that we haven't even begun to unlock yet when it comes to travel and AI and everything. So I guess kind of to wrap up and maybe bring a couple of for me, the key points to life. Like, I think Skyscanner has done this pendulum swing a lot of innovation, but of necessity. Like, we had to grow, we had to do certain things. And I don't for a second regret, or don't think anyone regrets the things we've done, but we had to learn when what we had done had come to the end of its lifespan, end of its run its natural course, so to speak, and learn to kind of pull back. And we haven't found that perfect middle point by a long way. But I guess to the title of the talk at the start, like, it is absolutely and has absolutely been critical for growth for us. I wouldn't be here, Skyscanner wouldn't be here if we hadn't been very innovative along the way. But equally, there's lots of times, even our direct booking product probably ran multiple months, multiple years, even longer than it should have. We didn't quite recognize the challenges that we were facing in just keeping things going. So there's a bit of a balancing act to be struck there. Thank you very much for listening, and happy to take any questions.
No, thank you. Has anybody got a question? Oh, several people got a question. Right. Just because it's easier, can we get to that gentleman for a start, please? And there's another one over there afterwards.
Hi there. My name is Ryan Collins. I'm a digital project manager over at Edinburgh Airport. We've taken a look at the data recently. We can see a lot of our users are mobile-centric, so we're seeing a lot less desktop and a lot more mobile users coming to use our website.
Yep.
Specifically, we're kind of wondering, whenever the pendulum sort of swung towards mobile and you and your developers decided, right, we need to get ourselves onto the app market, let's make this mobile friendly. Is there any advice you can give to companies like us to focus on mobile first, or that kind of idea?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have actually had a really live discussion on this recently. So one thing I didn't say, when we first released our mobile app, I think we estimated we'd have about 1 million downloads in the first year. We had 1 million in the first week. And we were like, oh, turns out mobile apps are a big thing. And that was interesting scaling up systems, etc. But that was at a point where I think there was a kind of famous quote, I think, from Mark Zuckerberg, where he'd basically like thrown his team out of a meeting because they'd come to him with a desktop design, and they hadn't come with a mobile design. And that was quite an extreme proposition or way of looking at it. But we've recently kind of come back to, well, where do we think we want to be from a mobile app, mobile web, and then desktop? The reality is most of our users are still on desktop. Most of our revenue is still on desktop. But lots of people search and are inspired on mobile, both mobile web and app. And so we've kind of said we want to be web fast, as in iterate quickly on web, both mobile web and desktop web. Iterate quickly, learn the lessons, throw lots of proof of concepts out there, generally try and learn a bit. And then the ones that win, the things that really have impact, we want to port them and bring them kind of feature parity to app. But then we say, so we want to be web fast, but then we want to be app best. And in that way, that is a case of saying, let's get the feature parity, let's bring what we can learn, because you can learn faster on web in general. Like you can make a deployment that is instantly live for everyone, not like the App Store or particularly the iOS App Store where you're waiting for release cycles, etc. But the app best piece is then, what are the things that are unique on mobile? Yes, there's push notifications and the kind of the basics. Please don't use my idea of the scanning around the globe thing. That was a terrible flop. But you can do quite a lot of things that are much better on app. Even the kind of navigation and stuff, it can quite often be a little better. So that's been our kind of change of proposition. We're not there. I mean, that's going to be like a probably multi-year journey to actually realize that. But that's kind of how we're thinking about it, that we still want to learn on desktop while that's where the majority of our users are, and then move across as quickly as we can afterwards.
Okay. Gentleman there with the red top.
Hi, Neil, Kramer Group. I think this is a wee bit more abstract. It's like, how do you define whether your innovation was a success or a failure? Because if it's a new feature and you start getting more revenue in, yes, sure, you can claim it's a success. But on an abstract level, like a team organisation or whether or not a standard's been working or anything like that, there's quite, metrics aren't really there for that other than this feels good. And what feels good for one person might not feel good for another. So how do you define innovation on that level and whether or not it was a success or not?
Yeah, so if you take our implementation of Spotify's model in a way, from an organizational point of view, we had a lot of challenges at the time. We were feeling very siloed, very isolated. Our design team sat over there, our product team sat over there, engineers sat over there, and it was very siloed. So when we were thinking about what we would do, we were anchoring ourselves on what the problem we were trying to solve. We were trying to solve silos. We were trying to solve a design team producing something that was ready to go, but 6 months before the product and development team were even thinking about that area. And so we understood the problem deeply and could really anchor on that as our change metric, so to speak. And we do that for a lot of things. We use a technique called briefing and back briefing. So the person who is trying to initiate the change writes a brief. The person that they're going to go and ask to think about this, almost like delegate to, etc., writes almost the same thing back to them, but in their own words, their own way of thinking about it, to get that strong alignment up front. So we use that process quite a lot to try and make sure, even for the more abstract things we're doing, what are the metrics, what are the things we want people to do or feel differently as a result of it. And talking to some of the employee enablement team this morning, they're looking at customer satisfaction, as in the employees' satisfaction of your laptops and your mobile phones and all the things you're doing there. So they're thinking about what is the thing we're trying to drive there. So we try and, even if it's not necessarily a revenue, normal KPIs side of thing, we're looking at it more from what's the behavioural belief or thing we're trying to alter.
I'm curious. Obviously, during lockdown, nobody could fly. The backside fell out of the holiday market, etc. Yeah. But that gave people pause. It gave them time to think. People are genuinely worried about climate change too. Have you noticed any sort of decrease in demand, or what's happening?
Travel's a funny space. You get what's called revenge travel. People have so much pent up demand, desire, etc., that even though there is there's still such a huge demand. I mean, we're back and exceeding our 2019 numbers. When I say revenge travel, it's really people. Yes, people are more eco-conscious. So we have seen when we've added information about the carbon intensity of a flight, we've seen preference going to less carbon-intensive travel. We've seen, I think, in some areas, we've seen people preferring shorter haul rather than longer haul. But that's not global. That's not everywhere. You see pockets of it depending on the people, the market, etc. So travel demand very much back. The interesting thing is that airlines. Richard Branson had a really famous quote. He said, "The best way to become a millionaire is be a billionaire and invest in an airline, because they hemorrhage money. They are not really that profitable. But COVID made them profitable because they grounded all their fleets. They could afford to increase the price of airfare. People still want to travel. So they've now got, instead of maybe flying planes that are 40, 50% full, they're all now 100% full. And they just grounded a bunch of stuff. Also, there's a huge shortage of pilots, so that they're hugely profitable. So it's the whole ecosystem in travel, at least in the flight side of travel, has changed a lot. But the demand is very, very, very much still there. The eco-conscious bit hasn't quite kicked in for everyone.
No, I did wonder. A question here on Slido saying, how do you innovate to stay competitive with Google Travel, who are presumably swallowing up a large share of the market?
Yeah. So interestingly, Google bought a company called ITA Software 10 years ago, and I think at the time we had a huge panic on that because it was like, oh, this is going to be the end of us. What we learned from that was that Google's a big company, right? And I have a huge amount, Android user, huge amount of respect. But they don't always do things right, and they definitely struggled with that acquisition. I think, or at least what we saw struggling a bit with the acquisition. What we do to be innovative or to kind of keep up with them, we're very true to a few key things. Our price accuracy, so what you see on Skyscanner versus what you see on a third party, that's our one of our core metrics, and we compare ourselves. So it's not necessarily innovative, but we compare ourselves to Google, Kayak, etc., and we consistently beat them. So we're not innovating. We're just making sure that the core offering we have is on par, if not better than them, and they have swallowed up a large market share. As I keep going back to the question, they have swallowed up a large market share, but not. They've done that in the States quite a lot, but not globally, and that's something I think that's been quite interesting for us, just seeing how it's evolved. It definitely didn't kill us overnight like we thought it might have done originally, and we like to say we put up a good fight.
Good man. One last question for that gentleman there.
Hi, my name is Mubashir, CEO of Welltime Limited. From what you are describing, it's interesting that you are ahead of the curve many times with your innovation. I'm curious, why not commercialize those opportunities, maybe license or partner up or collaborate with others? Why abandon them and then switch over to others when they were eventually catching up?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the reality on quite a few of the examples I gave is that commercializing them, as in giving them, selling them elsewhere, etc., would have been selling them to Google or selling them to Kayak or someone. So giving our competitive advantage away. So there's an honest answer there that wouldn't have been great for the business model. For one example I didn't talk about, where was our B2B product, and that had a pendulum swing. We had our own B2B API. It wasn't the one we used internally. We had a kind of skunkworks team that created it, and the reality is that then that team went on to other things. They didn't maintain it, and we had to switch it off because it was so far behind our actual product that every time we went to speak to kind of partners, they were like, "Oh, well, do you have carbon offsetting? No. Do you have multi-city? No." And so we kept not having what we needed in the product, so we switched it off. But we came back to it, and that's where that pendulum swing comes in, because we came back to it and have now actually launched a B2B API again, but this time we use the API that we sell externally. So we have commercialized it, we use it externally, but we kind of, the term dog fooding, right? We are using our own product, which helps us, it's not necessarily innovative in that way, but it certainly helps us maintain it.
I've never heard that expression before. It's deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, it's really...
Dog fooding, yeah. Not a good thing at all. Can I ask you to thank Andrew one more time again, please? Thank you.
Thank you.